I will call to order this May meeting of the Bloomington Board of Park Commissioners. And Kim, could we start with the roll call, please?
Kathleen Mills.
Here.
Ellen Rodkey.
Here.
Israel Herrera.
Here.
Jim Whitlatch.
Here.
Okay, so we have all four of our members, and we, of course, always start now with the consent calendar. All these regular kind of smaller contracts, and then surplus, and minutes from the last meeting, and that sort of thing. So do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, and a roll call vote of all those in favor?
Kathleen Mills.
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
Okay, that motion is unanimously carried. And then in section B, the public hearings and appearances, we will hear from Emily Book to tell us about the Bravo Award.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Emily Boot, Community Relations Coordinator, and staff would like to recommend Amy and John Zube for the May Bravo Award. Amy and John have been caring for a large city-owned sycamore tree for the past several years. Their efforts to maintain this tree have been noted and appreciated by all of our urban forestry staff, especially Haskell, who ultimately recommended them for this award. Their efforts to care for this tree are ones that will be beneficial to the city and its residents for decades to come. They weren't able to make it today. They're traveling all month, but they greatly appreciate the award. We've got a nice picture of the tree right there, which I actually live right by. I walk by that every day, and I had no idea. It's a very, very beautiful tree. So we're really appreciative of all the work they've put in and all the time and money they've put into caring for this city-owned tree. So we really, really appreciate them.
Thank you. Yes.
I walk by that tree too.
I was gonna say, if I could just say a couple words real quick.
Yeah.
I am very appreciative of folks like Amy and John that take tree stewardship kind of into their own hands. Obviously, with limited resources, we can't maintain everything to a perfect degree, but I'm just very appreciative of them maintaining this, I believe, 65 diameter American sycamore, making it one of the largest trees in Bloomington that's city-owned. Staple of that neighborhood for sure.
Yeah.
Haskell, I've got a question for you.
Yep.
Since you bring it up. I'm curious about sycamore trees. Do we ever plant sycamore trees?
I do. In limited supply. We've, in the history, have planted London planes as well, which are very similar in species, but they have a higher anthracnose resistance, which is a common issue with American sycamores. But we do still plant them, just not quite as street trees.
Yeah.
For this particular reason, they get gigantic and often cause issues with nearby houses and infrastructure.
Okay.
Thank you, Haskell. And
Thanks.
thank you to Amy and John Zube. That's a beautiful tree. Yeah.
You probably walk by it too. It's on
What-
Henderson.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Henderson? Around
Oh,
where?
I think I can,
First.
yeah,
Henderson
I can
first.
picture it now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't miss it.
Okay, and then we will move on to section C, and in C1, we have resolution 24-004, which is golf cart lease purchasing authority, and Keto will tell us about that.
Thank you. Kido from Sports Division. Staff recommends approval of this resolution updating authority to enter into a master lease agreement with First Financial Equipment Finance LLC. We are reauthorizing this with some specific language at the request of the financing company. The terms and conditions stay the same. A 3-year term with annual payment of $90,449.33.
Okay, and could you elaborate just a little bit more? You said there's some specific language that the financing company?
Yes, they want to get more details, including like delivery dates, warranties, leasing terms, return and purchase agreement. That's
Okay.
they want to ask, and they want to get more signatures on the document as well.
Yeah, that's in your resolution.
Okay,
I would just add a little
Yeah.
context that our legal department thought that the resolution that we did last month would suffice for the finance company's needs, in terms of just giving you signature authority to go ahead and sign that master lease agreement. And the finance company really wanted to come back. They really wanted all 4 signatures on it, kind of semantical, but ultimately we're just updating it to get it done and make sure things can move through. No substantial changes.
Right, okay. All right, good to know. Any other questions for Tim or Keto? Okay,
I will make a motion to pass and adopt the updated resolution with First Financial Equipment Finance LLC.
Second.
and a roll call vote of all those in favor?
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Reinke.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Aye.
Jim Whitlock.
Aye.
Okay, motion's carried, thank you. And then in C2, Bill Ream will tell us about the partnership with downtown Bloomington for the 4th of July parade.
Hi there, Bill Rain, Community Events Coordinator, and I'm here to recommend the approval of a partnership with, between the City of Bloomington Parks and Recreation and Downtown Bloomington Incorporated, otherwise known as DBI, for the 4th of July parade. There will be a 50-50 revenue split from the parade entry fees once the expenses have been made. This is the 16th year for this partnership, so it actually predates me by 1 year. And it's worked really well for all those years. The goal is to combine both our resources to provide the parade for the community. We're looking forward to working with them again. Our end, we coordinate all the logistics of the parade. On their end, they coordinate the judges and the review stand and the announcers. So they handle all that, which we're really grateful for. So we're thankful for them to do that again this year. Few info about the parade. It's on the 4th of July this year from 10 a.m. to about noon, and the community band will play before on the courthouse lawn at 9 a.m., which DBI also helps coordinate with that. And we are accepting applications for entries currently. They're online on our website at bloomington.in.gov/parks, in person at our office, or they can call me at 812-349-3748. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, all right, and as you say, kind of a long-standing partnership, and how many entries do you usually get?
I can get to between 50 and 60 this year,
Okay.
depending on how big some of them are. It all depends on the staging lots.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Bill?
I'll make a motion to approve the partnership agreement with Downtown Bloomington Inc. for 4th of July.
Second.
Okay, and a roll call vote of all those in favor?
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Reinke.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Aye.
Jim Whitlock.
Aye.
Okay, motion is carried. And then Bill will stay with us to tell us about C3, the contract with Southside Rental for the 4th of July parade.
Right. I'm here to recommend the contract for services with Southside Rental, where we will be renting tents, stages, tables, and chairs for both the 4th of July parade and for the holiday market. And the funding will come out of a couple different community events lines. The department has rented equipment from them for many years, and as I said, they set up the whole stage and tents and stuff for the 4th of July parade, and then they set up the tents that are in the parking lot out front here for the holiday market, those big ones that the vendors are under. And we've used them for both of these events for many, many years, and we're happy with what they do, and we're glad to have them back again this year. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
It's pretty straightforward. Any questions for Bill on C3? No.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Southside Rental for the 4th of July parade and the holiday market.
Second.
All right, and a roll call vote of all those in favor, please say aye.
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Reinke.
Aye.
Israel Herrera. Jim Whitlock.
Okay, motion carried. Thank you, Bill. And then Clarence Boone we'll address C4, which are the appointments to the Farmers Market Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, Clarence Boone. With the Farmers Market, staff recommends the reappointment of the following current Farmers Market Advisory Council members: Karen St. Rain, she's a farm vendor; Kip Schlegel, he's a farm vendor; Rebecca Vadis, who's a farm vendor; Tracy Bruce, food and beverage artisan; Andy Manansala, food and beverage artisan; and Michael Gleason, who is a customer representative. Staff recommends the appointment of Edward Robertson, who's a to the position of customer service representative, and Patricia Sigmund, who's a current farm vendor, as a farm vendor representative to the Farmers Market Advisory Council. As far as background, the Farmers Market Advisory Council consists of 11 members representing market vendors, customers, and food and beverage artisans. The council acts in an advisory capacity to the Board of Park Commissioners and park staff on policy matters relating to the farmers market. And we received 4 applications. A little bit of background on the new prospective applicants. Everett Robertson is a longtime Information Alley participant. He believes the market is a standout feature of the Bloomington community, and it is recognized worldwide, with friends who reported seeing our market on TV in LA and in Cambridge, England. He feels the community and vendor interactions at the market enhance each other, and market policy should promote more of this. As a regular participant, Ed is aware of how a typical day at the market progresses, and he is aware of the balance needed to make the market both well-functioning and open. A little bit of background on Patricia Sigmund. She is co-proprietor of High Acre Farm. This family farm was started in 1964, and they began selling produce at the farmers market in 1987. Patricia's familiarity and devotion for the advancement of the market sets her apart as an excellent candidate for council membership.
Okay, all right, sound like some good candidates there, and as well as the returning members. Any questions for Clarence?
Yeah, thank you for this information. So, do we have just one representative from the food and beverage artisans? Is that the only member, Andy Manansala?
Well, with the returning vendors, we'll have 1, 2, 3, we'll have 3, just one. 3 food and beverage artisans total. Several returning, and then the appointment we don't have a food and beverage artisan to be appointed as a new member.
How many food and beverage members do we have? Can you remind me?
We can have a total of, I believe, 4 food and beverage artisans as representatives? Just 2? Thank you for the clarification from Leslie Brenson.
So we have 2?
Scholars and Tracy Bruce.
Is the other one, okay. And we can have more representatives?
No, they only are allowed
2.
Oh, they are allowed 2?
Chris
Oh.
Manansala and Tracy Bruce.
The 11 members are 4 farm vendors, 2 food and beverage, and then the rest are customer reps.
And in the committee, the advisory board is the one selecting the candidates, or you are the one
Staff.
Staff, okay. Yeah, no more questions.
All right, there's not anything else, I guess we'll,
Okay, yeah, we can make a motion. I'll make a motion then to approve the reappointments of the 6 members to the Farmers Market Advisory Council, and then the new appointments of Edward Robertson and Patricia Sigmund.
Second.
okay. And a roll call vote, please, Kim. All those in favor, say aye.
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Radke,
Aye.
Israel Ferrera,
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
Okay, motion's
Thank
carried.
you.
Thanks, Clarence. And then in C5, Shelby will tell us about the partnership agreement with IU Health for facilitated public health programs.
Yeah, I haven't got to talk to you guys in a long time. Shelby Drake, Health and Wellness Coordinator, and I'm here to recommend the new renewed partnership with IU Health Bloomington. So this is the hospital in regards to public health programming, so adolescent programming, older adult programming, and a new program we're trying to start this year with public health in the parks, focusing on our unhoused population, hepatitis A, C, and just general health and wellness of the whole community. We've had some background. We've had a partnership with IU Health Bloomington since 2010. We've gone through 9 strategic action plans with them, and every 3 years we do a community health needs assessment, which we are currently in the process of starting the one for 2024. That will go through 2027. In 2022, we didn't renew the partnership with IU Health Bloomington just because of staff turnover in my position. So we would like to restart that.
Okay, and so it sounds like there's a different focus than possibly each time you have.
Yeah, so it's the strategic action plan has just taken a different shape. Really, we used to kind of formulate their strategic action goals and our strategic action goals together. We no longer do that. We do that separately. So our partnership looks a little bit different just because of that formatting. But we're working on the same types of programs. So still bike rodeos, vaccine clinics, education, that they can provide the clinical instruction and we can provide the facilities and the people.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Any other questions for Shelby? No? Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the partnership with IU Health Bloomington for public health programming.
Second?
All right, and a roll call vote of all those in favor?
Kathleen Mills.
Aye.
Ellen Rogers.
Aye.
Israel Herrera. Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Shelby. Motion's carried. And then C6, it is time again for Steve Cotter to talk about the Deer Browse report.
Thank you. Yes, I'm here today also to seek approval for the contract with White Buffalo Inc. to manage the deer hunt at Griffey. And I just saw Kevin Tungzikovic walk in from Ecologic, so he'll be here in a minute to talk about the deer browse data. But we are hopeful to hire White Buffalo again to manage the deer hunt at Griffey this November. It would be the first 2 weekends of deer season, November 16 and 17, and November 23 and 24. The contract amount is not to exceed $24,548. If approved, the amount will be paid out of the Natural Resources Non-Reverting Fund. Studies of the deer population in Bloomington officially began with the establishment of the joint Bloomington-Monroe County Deer Task Force in 2012. And it was a citizen group created after ecologists raised concerns about deer damage to the Griffey area. The task force recommended that deer populations be reduced at Griffey, and they recommended originally a sharpshooting effort to take care of that. We did try to do a sharpshooting effort in 2014, but it was unsuccessful due to a large acorn crop. And then we were able to get one done, a sharpshoot in 2017, where 62 deer were removed. We then participated in the Community Hunting and Access Program through the Department of Natural Resources for several years, where they provided some funding to allow for White Buffalo to manage the hunts. They've been with us since the beginning. They did the sharpshooting effort, and they've managed the hunts since. So we were able to have a hunt in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And since we began, 254 deer have been removed from the preserve. Safety is their number 1 priority. They have a perfect track record in that regard, so we're very comfortable with the contractor. They do a proficiency screening at a shooting range to make sure that the hunters who have applied for the program are accurate and safe. And think that we're going to need to continue to do this work into the future. The deer population at Griffey is doing well, and we think that we're going to need to continue it for as long as we can see into the future at this point. So we will be working with the IU Research and Teaching Preserve to coordinate closures during the hunts if the contract is approved, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about the hunt itself.
Okay, I mean, one thing that just stands out to me that I think is kind of interesting is going back to 2017, we were first discussing this, and I just remember, you know, the ecologists and, you know, the biologists definitely wanted us to do this, but there were some people in the community who were like, well, there just aren't that many deer out there to begin with. But I mean, the total's 254 so far that we've?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So still heavy deer presence out there.
There is, and we think to get the plant population healthy again, we need to keep that deer number down to somewhere between 5 and 10 per square mile. Griffey Lake Nature Preserve is about 2 square miles, so there are many more deer out there than the ecosystem can support right now if we're going to get those plants back to a healthy state.
Is that, so do you have a count on about how many deer are currently in Griffey? I mean, you said 5 to 10 per square mile, but we have more than that right now. But is there any counting that we do?
We don't. That was discussed extensively before we embarked on deer management at Griffey. It turns out it's an expensive endeavor, and it's not very accurate.
Sure.
Also, we don't know if there is a set number of deer feeding at Griffey all the time, or if it's a higher number that come and go.
Sure.
But our main focus is on the health of the plants, so we monitor the plant heights and their reproductive ability. We would love to know how many deer are out there, but there's not really a good way to determine that right now. We have been keeping an eye on that, and there are some different protocols that show promise, but to date, we have not done any deer counts out there.
And the Deer Task Force, that group is not an active task force within the city boards and commissions now, is that right? They kind of came together, created some of these ideas, and then those ideas have been carried out, but they're not actively meeting anymore?
That is correct.
Okay.
They made recommendations, and then
Right.
they terminated the
Right.
Deer
And
Task Force.
Who else, I guess, I'm just curious, like, I know that there's the rules now about not feeding deer in the city. Like, I guess, what other, or do we coordinate at all with just other programs for deer management across this city? Or, because this is really the only program that Parks oversees. Is that right?
That is correct,
Okay.
yes. And we worked with a researcher from Ball State who looked at the deer at Griffey and in town as well. We speak regularly with animal control about this issue, but we are only involved with management of deer within Griffey Lake Nature Preserve
Okay.
so far.
Gotcha.
How is the compensation, is the 24,548, how does that compare with other years? Has it been about the same, or?
It's actually less than many of the years. We did 3 weekends originally, but that was conflicting with people's hiking plans on Thanksgiving weekend. So we wanted to leave the park open for that weekend so that people can get out and hike. But we've gotten to a point where the hunters are skilled enough and know the terrain well to where the numbers have not dropped by a third, as we would expect, going from 3 weekends to 2. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed that the weather cooperates on those 2 weekends.
And how many hunters are there for this season?
It's been about 25 a year recently, 25, 26 hunters.
And White Buffalo is the company that is going to do the screening for the, it says safety and shooting performance?
Yes, so White Buffalo rents a shooting range in southern Indiana, and then the applicants for the program have to go through their proficiency screening at that shooting range to prove that they can hit the target, which I should have mentioned, all the hunters shoot downward from tree stands that are at least 12 feet high in the tree, so that the bullets go downward instead of horizontally across the landscape. But they have to show that they can handle their firearm in a safe manner and that they are an accurate shot.
And could I ask this, because I don't see it, when it says the firm has familiarity with the Midwest, the hunters are normally people from our county, from Bloomington, or it could be from other areas, and this might be the first time hunting here in Griffin Lake.
It's a combination. Many of them are from around here. All of the hunters have to have an Indiana deer license, so most of them are Indiana residents. And a lot of them have been coming many years, so White Buffalo is familiar with them. And if they're new hunters, they have to go through their proficiency screening before they're eligible to hunt.
This is not really just for the deer hunting, although the potential liability causes me some concern, and it's not necessarily just a Parks Department concern, but I do want, when I look at these contracts that have $1 million worth of liability insurance, that's $1 million is a lot of money, but it's not what it used to be. And I wonder if there should be a discussion among ourselves and with legal and with the city of Bloomington about increasing the amount of general liability insurance we get. The most expensive cost for insurance is the first $1 million. Getting additional coverage after that is probably not as expensive, is less expensive. And I just wonder if we had a catastrophic thing happen and we're faced, we are protected, the city and the parks are protected by the Indiana Tort Claim Act, but if our private vendors are not protected by that and people have the potential of catastrophic injuries, $1 million doesn't go very far. And some of these companies don't have the assets that are going to protect them. So I wonder, as a general, it's not really a question for you, it's more a comment to all of these contracts, is they always have $1 million, and I'm just wondering if the city legal and risk management people ought to start thinking about increasing that amount of insurance.
Yeah, excellent point. We will talk to legal and see what they think. Thank you.
And then my last question is, I don't know anything about hunting. When deer season starts in November, how long does it go for? And is there a reason, like an advantage to choosing the beginning of the season as opposed to somewhere else?
Yeah, deer season is relatively short. There are different dates associated with different hunting methods.
Oh, okay.
Archery is longer. Firearm season is short, and we use firearms because it's a lot more efficient and more humane, people think. And I'm sorry, what was the second?
Yeah, just like, is it advantageous, like, to be hunting at the very beginning of? I don't know. I don't know.
It absolutely is. Yes, the deer become a lot more skittish after opening weekend. So the highest numbers that we have taken are always on opening day.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Makes sense. They get smart.
All right, and I see Kevin is here, so I will turn it over to him to talk about the browse data that he has been collecting.
Great.
So I'm Kevin Tungesvik, and I work for Ecologic, a ecological restoration and consulting firm here in Bloomington. And since 2018, I've been under contract to monitor the deer browse out at Griffey. So What I monitor in the spring, I monitor herbaceous plants. So these are the non-woody species, and particularly 2 or 3 indicator species that are definitely affected by the presence of deer. And then later in the summer, I also monitor browse on woody understory species, so the shrubs and sapling layer as well. So what we've seen since I started this monitoring in 2018, that those first few hunts, we had a fairly rapid recovery of the vegetation to a point, but then in more recent years, it's plateaued. So we saw a immediate improvement following the initiation of hunts, but then a plateau in recent years, and not much change since 2021. And this is just through 2023. I have done the spring browse data for 2024, the field work, but I unfortunately haven't had time to analyze that yet because it was just done a couple of weeks ago. But so we need to, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So here's the woody sapling data, and you can see the height, the average sapling height was increasing steadily through 2018 through 2020, and then began to level off and hasn't changed a lot since 2020. So again, we saw those initial hunts have a pretty significant effect, but then anecdotally, the browse on woody vegetation remains substantial. There's a lot of browse still on those woody understory species, so it's definitely still affecting the woody understory significantly, because there is a significant, especially on favorable species. There's a couple of shrubs they really like to browse. Roundleaf greenbrier and maple leaf viburnum are a couple, and those are probably over half the shoots on those shrubs are still being browsed every year. So the deer browse remains significant. We could go to the, yeah, here we go. This is also, we also measure the diameter growth of the shrubs, and that's the root collar diameter. And so again, you can see a steady increase there between 2018 and 2021, and then a leveling off since 2021. It's important to remember that these plants are subject to all kinds of environmental stresses other than deer browse. They're out in the wild, they're subjected to all the weather, they're subjected to drought, they're subjected to, and it's difficult to tease out what's affecting their growth. So just because some of these metrics have leveled out doesn't mean that deer browse isn't a less of a stress, but there may be other stressors also influencing. And I would point to the fact that we've had very dry Junes the last 2 years, in 2022 and 2023, which does affect it may affect the growth of the woody plants, because that's still within the woody plant growing season, and it also may affect some of the herbaceous plants may go dormant earlier if the soil dries out earlier. So keep in mind that although we're monitoring this for deer browse, deer browse isn't the only thing affecting these plants. Okay, so one of the herbaceous plants we monitor is Jack in the Pulpit, and Jack in the Pulpit is not a heavily favored species for actually eating by the deer, but it's very sensitive to the compaction from deer hooves, so it doesn't like compacted soil. So it responds to the lack of compaction by growing more vigorously. And you can see there was a steady increase in Jack in the Pulpit height from 2019 through 2021, and then a leveling off since then. So again, the metrics have plateaued a little bit in the past couple of years. And then if we go to the next slide, another of the herbaceous species. This one showed a really strong response to the initial deer hunts. You can see the height of the Solomon seal increased pretty substantially. We had a really good trend going there between 2019 and 2022, and then again it leveled off in the past year as well. But this is one of the stronger responses that we've seen to the hunts the positive effect of reducing the deer population out there. So in summary, all metrics have stagnated a little bit since 2021, but we definitely saw a response early from the deer hunts. And the browse has moderated since the calls begin, but there is still locally very heavy browse, and it's not evenly distributed throughout the park. So there's very heavy browse particularly in the upstream part of Griffey Creek Valley above the reservoir is very heavily browsed, and the southwest part of the park is also near the neighborhoods, also has very heavy browse in it. And so the other issue that's intertwined with the deer are invasive plant species. So we do get deer browse on invasive plant species, and one of the things that they seem to really like that upstream part of the Griffey Creek is there's a heavy presence of invasive shrubs, privet, that they like to browse, particularly in the winter. And the other factor is the deer also spread invasive species along their tracks. So if you go up a deer path from the Griffey Creek floodplain up one of the hills, you can see a path of Japanese stilt grass following the deer, because the deer are actually spreading the invasive species on their hooves. So these are related issues, and it's important that both be addressed. So if you want to go to the next slide. Just there, in 2019, I had the good fortune to really do a detailed survey of the vegetation out there and to map it. And the areas in red and orange are where there's heavy invasive plant pressure. And you can see those creek valleys upstream from the reservoir are where that invasive plant pressure, and that seems to be where I think a lot of the deer, the winter browse is occurring. That's where they're hanging out in the winter, is in those dense shrub thickets upstream from the reservoir. So those are issues, and these have been addressed. A few of those areas that I mapped in 2019 no longer have dense shrubs because there's been either contracts or in-house work by park staff to reduce those. So certain areas, especially in the southwest portion, have been greatly reduced since this mapping was done in 2019. So there's definitely some credit to the park staff and to the contractors for reducing that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right. Thank you, Kevin. And I appreciate your explanation as well, that you can't provide a iron-tight explanation of some things because there are other factors like the weather and things such as that. So yeah, I appreciate the details. Any questions for Kevin?
I've got a couple questions. When you show that the, I can't remember what you called it, but the height has not gone up over the years. I think what you show that graph, how it goes up. Does that, again, excuse my ignorance, but does that mean that, how do you measure that? Does that mean that they reach a certain height and they don't go any higher? Or how do you measure that their growth has been stunted or whatever the situation is?
So the spring herbaceous monitoring is done when the plants have reached their full growth potential for the season, because these are spring woodland wildflowers and they have a spurt of growth before the trees leaf out to take advantage of photosynthesize when there's no tree leaves. So I physically go out there and we have these monitoring quadrats along these transects. So there's a 90-meter transects and half-meter quadrats every 10 meters along those transects. And I look at these indicator plants and I physically hold a ruler up and measure each one of them to get an average height. So we were looking at the average of all those heights, and there's 12 of those transects, and each with 10 half-meter quadrats in them.
So if they're not as high, what's the correlation to the deer, I guess?
So there's different reasons for different species. For example, this is Solomon seal graph up here. The deer heavily favor that as food, so they're physically eating that plant. And so obviously being eaten
Makes it shorter.
Makes you shorter. It makes you shorter from the browse itself, but it also makes you shorter because it removes your ability to photosynthesize and store carbohydrates in your root for the next year. So if you get browsed in year 1, in year 2 you're going to be shorter because you weren't able to make food to store in your root system for the following year's growth.
Okay. And they may eat part of it, and then some of it may grow back, so when you go and measure it, it's going to be shorter than if it'd been able to grow to its full height. Is that part of it as well?
Yeah, and these plants that I'm measuring, these spring plants, they only have one spurt of growth a year. So if they're browsed that year, they don't grow back that year. They only grow once a year. So they've lost their entire season if they get browsed off in the spring.
And really, the only way to the extent it's caused by the deer, the only way to really deal with that is to further reduce the deer.
Yes, yeah, right, correct. And like I said, it's definitely been a big improvement since 2018 when I started this study. I mean, it was very bad then, and it's still substantial. It still is definitely having a substantial effect on the vegetation out there, especially the favored browse species, the ones that they really find tasty. So there's definitely a need to continue based on what I see out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to vote on the approval of the contract with White Buffalo for the 2024 Griffey Lake Deer Hunt.
Yeah. There's not any other questions. I'll make a motion to approve the contract with White Buffalo, Inc. For 2024.
Second?
All right, and a roll call vote of all those in favor?
Kathleen Mills.
Aye.
Ellen Rogers.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
Motion is carried. All right, thank you to Steve and to Kevin. And then in our section D, we'll have a report from Tim on the Building Trades Park Master Plan.
That's right. Good afternoon, Board of Park Commissioners. Tim Street, Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm here to share with you today the final Building Trades Park Master Plan that we've been working on for not quite a year, but close to a year. We authorized a contract to begin on this with Mater Design last summer. Engaged in some public meetings thereafter, and have the final product here today. So what you're seeing up here right now, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to kind of go through the park and the conditions and what we're looking at, are the current conditions of Building Trades Park. And Kim, if you would go forward one slide, please. These are the former conditions of Building Trades Park.
Can you move the picture off to the side? The
Top
camera,
Yeah, the top,
is that possible to move that?
like top right corner.
Yeah,
far
top right
maybe?
corner would be
Yeah.
good.
I think it's different on your screen than it is up there.
Oh.
Yeah. Or just minimize it even, Kim.
There.
Oh,
you go.
yeah, great,
Perfect.
okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's pause here a second again since we're reviewing this. Current conditions of the park, we've got the open lawn, the old sports court area on the west, the parking lot, and the two separate 2 to 5 and 5 to 12 playgrounds at the north side. The RR is a restroom facility, and the two S's are shelters. What actually started us down this path to doing a new master plan is the lower shelter, the one on the right there, is in poor condition. Decreasing condition, I would say, as well as the large ramp on the east side of the park that is meant to provide an accessible route north-south across the park is also in increasingly poor condition. And additionally, doesn't technically meet ADA standards because it is one long straight ramp run and does not have landings built in that are typically required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if we just look briefly at the park's history, go forward one slide. Of course, before there was any white settlement, we recognize, all of Bloomington was native land for various tribes, and when settlement came, soon after there came industry like this. So Building Trades Park used to be on the south side of town. And at one point, this is what was there. This is actually a picture of quarried rock from that site, just off 2nd Street. And for years thereafter, it existed as a swimming hole. And there's a lot of local historic accounts of people swimming in the quarry swimming hole before it was filled in. The park was largely filled in and then donated to the Parks Department for a cost of $1 by local businessman Ralph Rogers and some others in 1949. And then in 1967, it underwent, Kim, you can go forward one slide, some significant upgrades along with the Building Trades Union, and which is how it got its name. A lot of the infrastructure in the park is original back to 1967. Kim, can you go forward one slide? So we started the master plan process in summer 2023. We had a kickoff meeting here in this room. In September 2023, Mater Design was here. They came with some background information and some early concepts on what we could do with the park. We made those draft plans available for feedback online for a number of weeks, received quite a few responses, and then had a second meeting in December to review those concepts. Kelsey and Jeff from Mater Design basically brought to that first meeting a few different directions the park kind of could go. You know, one was a little more sports heavy, one was a little more art and nature heavy, just to start the conversation with neighbors and community members. And there was a pretty clear direction on where to go from that September meeting, sort of towards art and nature concept. These are some other current photos of the park and its infrastructure. There's a lot of these murals recognizing the Building Trades Union and their role in acquiring and building this park. The middle left is the lower shelter that's in increasingly poor condition and also does not have good accessibility to it or visibility. The top and the top right are the playground, which dates back to 2003, excuse me. So one of our older playgrounds at this point as well. The sport court surface is in there, and then the ramp that we need to replace is down there at the bottom right. Okay, Kim, go ahead. One of the challenges of working with what was formerly a quarry site is that there's really interesting elevations to deal with, especially when we're thinking about accessibility and creating good access through the park. Part of the reason we're really focusing on accessibility with this park is, one, because of the ramp on the east side and the need to replace it. Two, this is really a great connection between the Prospect Hill neighborhood to the north and the new Hopewell development to the south. There will also be, the city has through the engineering department, protected bike lane project on 2nd Street slated for 2025. That will affect the 2nd Street corridor directly to the south of this. And of course, we also anticipate in coming years an increased demand on this park from the increase in housing that will happen immediately to the south. We are, of course, building the Hopewell Commons Park, a very urban park in that Hopewell corridor. It will not have the traditional green space and some of the mature trees and potential sport court and playground that this park already has to offer. So we do anticipate that there will be an increased demand in use for this park, as well as we already have a need to replace some of the aging infrastructure and make good plans for the future of this park. All of that leads to, great timing, this final master plan. And the master plan is actually, of course, not just the map here, but it's a whole booklet of information about the history of the park, about things that have been looked into, about concepts and ideas. This map represents the final master plan that will be released to the public. We wanted to present it to the park board first today for any questions. Then it will become available on our website. We'll communicate it back out to the neighborhoods that were involved. Of course, a master plan is not construction documents. There is a difference. We use a master plan to make sure we're making cohesive decisions when we do projects in the park that will help us build a cohesive park, paths that connect to each other, accessibility connections, things like that, that will all work together for the long-term future of the park. Right now, we do have some American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, slated for this budget year to start on some accessibility improvements. So a phase 1 of accessibility improvements at this park that will focus on replacing that north-south ramp with a more accessible route. And hopefully, if the funds go far enough, also replacing a shelter with a better located and more accessible picnic shelter for the neighborhood to use. Just kind of drawing the overview here on the direction that the master plan has gone. It has sort of reimagined some of the paths through the park. One, to be on better grades that are more universally accessible. Two, if you see the paths that run from the bottom right, sort of diagonally to the northwest, Kelsey, who works for Mater Design, looked up the original plats, and those were actually the original site of the railroad tracks that came into the quarry to haul the stone away. So it is a nod to the history of the site. If you kind of imagine, if you've heard of the High Line in New York City, where they've taken that railroad and kind of turned it into a park, there's a little bit of inspiration there into honoring and recognizing some of the history of the park. It's preserving some of the open space for play. It's potentially, adding some native plants. We actually heard a large demand from the community for not a skate park, but a smaller scale skate spot to sort of activate one of the hidden areas kind of back there in the corner below the retaining walls. We would look long-term at merging the playgrounds around the current restroom building. We heard very clearly we did not need to expand the parking, keep the parking the same. The location of a new shelter in the northwest of the park, and then the sport courts. And even since we've developed this master plan with feedback from the September meetings and the online feedback, we've heard more about the sports courts, some additional concerns about pickleball and some of the sound associated with it. So of course, that is not in our phase 1 plan. That's something that we'll have an opportunity to investigate a little bit more if ultimately, pickleball is the right thing for this neighborhood, or if more of a multi-use court would be appropriate. So I've talked a lot. That was the process. I believe we've shared the booklet with you as well, and we'll be making that publicly available. And I'm happy to talk about the park or answer any questions.
I guess you sort of addressed one thing I was just thinking of is, and I hope the pickleball people don't take this the wrong way, but, if 10 years from now pickleball's kind of waning, can that space be, easily converted into something else, or?
I think here, absolutely. Yeah, we've seen that, this has been sports courts for a long time. Right now, it's definitely underutilized as just basketball courts, but actually just this week, Keto and I heard from a group that I did not know existed, the Bike Polo Club. They've been playing bike polo there on Sundays. So that was news to me. So great to hear from the community and learn new things about how our space is being used. So of course, those are some things we can consider. But yeah, this is a nice space for potential use or reuse.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'm curious, will bike polo have to relocate based on that?
Well, we're a ways away from any final decisions on the sport courts.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they would be able to use, they said that you typically use about a third, I think, of the space. So it might be that a basketball court would be enough for them to use. That's something we would explore further before deciding on this. The pickleball noise thing is something I think that's been picking up momentum a bit, even nationally, trending and thinking about. So that's something we want to keep an eye on. Again, we're not planning to replace these by the end of the year or anything like that. That'll be a next phase down the line. But it was good to conceptualize and see what can we fit in this space on the master plan, and we can investigate that further.
Is where the sport court and the pickleball courts, is that the same footprint as what's there now?
Correct. That is an existing concrete fenced pad that is perfect for reuse.
I assume somebody someday will invent a quiet pickleball.
I've read some things that they're on the way. Who knows if it'll catch on?
I wish I had some engineering skill and could figure that out, but surely that'll
It
happen.
would make you rich, yeah. All right, any other questions or comments for Tim? No?
Looks good.
Yeah, it does. Looks
really
exciting,
good.
yeah.
I think it's really cool to see just the narrative that Mater kind of wove into the report, and just really thoughtful. And I think that the public will really appreciate that.
I guess the only other thing I think about is with the new park we're building and the close proximity, it's hard for me to picture what that looks like, but whether or not there's any way to make kind of a linear park that really connects them really well.
Not exactly with the way that it's platted, but if you see at the center bottom of this diagram, that is Fairview Street. So that is going to have an improved crossing of 2nd Street right there to a nice wide path that will connect down basically to the west side of Hopewell Commons. And the nice thing, these two parks are in very close proximity, but they are very different. And we really don't have a lot of duplicity of features between these two parks. Hopewell Commons is very much an urban seating, gathering place, whereas this is more of a traditional neighborhood park.
Okay.
And I just end by saying I just really want to thank Mater Design. They were really wonderful to work with here, but also especially to our community members who I really appreciated our community engagement on this project. Folks from the Prospect Hill neighborhood, some from McDowell Gardens and beyond. We had a really great, robust public process in coming up with this.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
And then we will go to our last section, Section E, which is public comment. If we have anyone in person who would like to comment, they can approach the podium, or Kim will check to see if we have anyone online. Okay. Yes. Yeah, come on up if you could tell us your name, please. I don't know if there's a sign-in sheet down there. There sometimes is. Okay.
Hi, I'm Peeler. I do come to represent the Bloomington Bike Polo Club. It was nice to speak with Mr. Street this week and voice some of our concerns for the park. I don't have much to say except that we just wanted to echo the concern that the sport courts in the park have an eye toward the future of sports in the city, and that as many sort of multi-use spaces are provided as possible, and also that, I'm sure that this is part of processes that will be discussed in the future as well, but surface improvements to the existing concrete there would be, I think, really appreciated by all users of the courts. And we know that there was some interest in futsal in the space, as well as we've been speaking to roller hockey, or members of the roller hockey community in town who have used the court in the past. We're using it consistently for a couple of years. And so we feel that a focus on, multi-use space, of course, that means pickleball courts that can also be used for tennis. But an enclosed court seems like something that would be used regularly by members of a variety of sporting communities. And so an eye toward that multi-use design, I think, would be really appreciated by people who currently use the courts, and also might be more likely to use the courts in the future if those kind of improvements were made.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the input. All right, and then we'll go back over to Tim for any last announcements.
Sure. You heard from me a lot. Just a few final things. A few things going on. We have got the summer launch, which is a preview of all our summer programs this Friday at Bryant Park, 3 to 6 p.m. We have the Farmers Market 50th anniversary celebration, which is this Saturday, starting at 10 a.m. and then continuing through the remainder of market with some different memories being read, great music, and all the usual things that go along with a good farmers market Saturday. Of course, pools and the spray pad open this weekend, big weekend for that. Thank you to all the staff who've been busy preparing for all of those events, and the pools and the spray pad and all of the things we're getting opened, and who have worked hard on all of our fantastic events over the last weeks as well. Kim, would you pull up the very last slide in that presentation? Sorry to make you bring it up one last time. I want to give a shout out to both Julie Ramey and Ace Chestnut and our action team that worked on, we challenged ourselves to come up with a tagline. I added one at the end. Keep going. Keep going. I snuck one in on you. We have a new Bloomington Parks tagline. I think that's going backwards. There we go. It's coming. Oh, I don't know what happened to it. I thought I saved it in there. I will show it to you. It is Explore, Play, Connect. I think it's really great. Our staff action team came up with that. It's a really great addition. You'll see it on some of our marketing materials to talk about the impacts that parks have and that what we do in the community. And lastly, just our typical upcoming Park Board events. We have a work session scheduled for June 4th at 4 p.m. Here in City Hall. And then our next regular meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners is June 25th at 4 p.m. as well. I think Kim's doing one final look to see if that did end up being in there.
We saw, I know that everyone hasn't seen it, but we saw it in your email, though, too.
There we go. It's on the
Yes.
last slide there, Kim.
It has a lot of movement in it.
Yes.
Yes.
It does. So, thank you to everyone who was
right.
involved with that. So,
All right, thank you. And with that, I'll adjourn the May meeting of the Bloomington Board of Park Commissioners.